Eyes up, Guardian. Much like a giant, cold, aloof Dyson sphere in the sky, the outer shell of Destiny's story can be hard to get through. With much of the lore of the Destiny universe scattered between online-only grimoire cards, physical collector's edition books, and individual pieces of gear, and with complex histories spanning millions of years and into parallel timelines, virtual realities, and alternate dimensions, it's easy to understand why many players get lost. But the Destiny universe has a beautiful and immense world filled with interesting characters, fantastic stories, and satisfying payoffs for those who are willing to go the distance. But don't be alarmed if you don't have time to sit through its more than 2,000 lore entries in order to get a grasp of Destiny's story. We've got you covered. It's time for you to understand your destiny. But before we kick things off, a quick disclaimer: we won't be covering Rise of Iron and Curse of Osiris. They're self-contained stories that don't bear too heavily on the overall narrative of the rest of the timeline. And we've got to give a big thanks to Scoobydeezy, who put together that incredibly comprehensive timeline and wrote this very script, so he has power over every word I'm going to say going forward. Unknown eons past, the Traveler. Since the dawn of time, there's been a war between form and formless, order and disorder, the gentle and life-giving way of the sky, and the cold and unforgiving filter of the deep. Where the sky cherishes life and seeks to bring complexity and harmony, the deep seeks to prune everything away until the universe takes a single final shape. Sometime in the distant past of our universe, an entity known to us only as the Traveler is created to contain the power of the sky. Wielding the power of its light, aka space magic, and journeying across the cosmos, it blesses civilizations with gifts and uplifts every world it touches. But the Traveler would leave these worlds as quickly as it arrives, drawing as little attention to itself as possible, because its ancient enemy, the Deep, is always close behind. Enter the HIVE. Sometime before the creation of our solar system, the HIVE. Great worms imprisoned deep in the core of a gas giant called Fundament use the power of the deep to call out across the void of space to call others towards the gaseous planet. Over time, Fundament becomes filled with a multitude of life. The smallest and weakest of these species, the krill, discovers the dead corpse of a small larvae washed up on their shore. But this worm is more powerful in death, and whispers secrets to them about a coming apocalypse. The king of the Osmian court, a nation tribe of the krill, becomes obsessed with the dead worm. Not surprisingly, when people see you talking to a dead animal and rambling about the end of the world, things don't go too well. After some minor drama involving a coup d'etat, the three surviving daughters of the Osmian king, Arusha, Sothona, and Zero, flee for their lives, Warmind in tow. The sisters pledge an oath of vengeance against the traitor that overthrew their father, and the worm eventually leads them into the core of the planet where they meet the imprisoned great worms. The sisters make a pact with the worms, take their larvae as symbiotes, and gain the power over life and death itself. Oh right, and also minor detail, you have to keep feeding the worms through slaughter and conquest or else they'll eat you from the inside out, but yeah, no biggie, right? We cool? We're cool. So the sisters take a bunch of the worms back up to the surface, tell their friends that drugs are cool and will kill you if you don't take them, by the way, and thus the HIVE are born. Arusha would become Oryx, the Taken King, Sothona would become Savathun, the Witch Queen, embodiment of cunning, and Zero would become Zivu Arath, the Warrior. They reign at the top of the High Pantheon and learn how to hide their deaths in a parallel reality called the Ascendant Plane, which basically means they can only really be killed on their own turf. From there, the HIVE go on to begin a reign of billions of years of destruction and terror throughout the universe in service of the worms and the deep. Nothing stands before the might of the HIVE. Dawn of Life and Soul, the Nine. Next on the list of ancient unknowable galactic beings are the Nine. Awakening at the dawn of life in the solar system, these primordial dark matter beings were created by the gravity of the sun and its major planets. So, not Pluto. Sorry, man. As the systems spanning gravitational loops of dark matter form their thoughts, the Nine seek to understand our reality. For if life in the solar system were ever to die, the Nine would once again sleep. So thankfully, they're humanity's allies, for as long as that can remain true. Relatively recent history, the Fallen. Before arriving in the Sol system, the Traveler, like many worlds before, blesses a race called the Elixni and ushers them into a grand golden age. But when a cataclysm known as the Whirlwind brings a total collapse of Eliksni society, the Traveler up and leaves. Thank you. Next. The Eliksni houses that still remain fall to infighting. War and famine rage. Thus, the Eliksni become known as the Fallen. The Fallen create machines servitors made in the likeness of the Traveler to ration the ether they need for survival and to enforce a rigid hierarchy. Then they leave their dying home in pursuit of the Traveler, the Great Machine, to find salvation and reclaim their lost position as the Traveler's blessed. 21st century, the Traveler arrives. Finally, sometime in the 21st century, the Traveler arrives in our solar system. Humanity is unsure of its intentions when it suddenly begins to terraform Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. 2 years later, the Ares 1 mission is sent to intercept the mysterious traveling orb as it arrives on Mars. This begins a golden age of prosperity for humanity. Advances in technology, scientific understanding, and tripled human lifespans are only a few of the many benefits that the Traveler brings. Fast travel between worlds becomes a reality, and new life begins to spring up on the worlds the Traveler visits. One such example are the Ahamkara. These shape-shifting wish dragons have the power to grant wishes to any who ask, feeding on the reality that they replace.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
They eat reality and poop wishes. I'm not making this up. I couldn't make this up if I tried. But the Golden Age is not without its troubles. On Venus, humanity discovers ancient ruins belonging to the Vex, a complex neural network of microorganisms, riding around in the bellies of little Jaegers that convert anything they can get their hands on into part of their vast processing network. Their goal to find a way to become part of the very fabric of the universe, something they call the pattern. To the Vex, there is no right and wrong, there is only the pattern, and the Vex meet any perceived threat to the pattern with extreme prejudice. The Ishtar Collective is a scientific project founded on Venus to study the Vex. Academics and scientists rush to Venus, and the collective becomes a hub of scientific discovery. Though not without risks, one particular team of scientists finds themselves boxed into a simulation paradox, resulting in 227 sentient clones by the time they finally are able to escape the bounds of the simulation. In addition to the Ishtar Collective, the other main hub of scientific research during the Golden Age is a Martian facility founded by a man named Clovis Bray. The Clovis Bray research conglomerate is responsible for many scientific breakthroughs across the system, from engrams, a new state of matter capable of storing incredibly complex objects and data in an encrypted state, to exoscience, transferring the human mind into a mechanical frame, to the Warmind project, a defensive network of war satellites powered and overseen by the AI Rasputin. Clovis's daughter, Anna Bray, would teach the AI how to think and act as human, enabling Rasputin to have sole oversight over the warsats and defense of Earth and her colonies. Great Exodus ships are created to carry colonists to the new paradises that the Traveler has created for them and beyond. Some carry advanced Clovis Bray technology to aid in colonization, some carry great weapon forges to be a defense against the unknown, but all of them carry with them the hope of humanity's golden age. About 500 years ago, the collapse. But like the fallen before them, humanity's golden age is not to last. Something else is detected at the system's edge, coming fast. The Traveler leaves Io in the middle of terraforming and heads straight to Earth. An ancient enemy that humanity called the Darkness, perhaps the Deep itself, has pursued the Traveler across the stars, and things got really, really bad. Humanity's other enemies take advantage of the chaos. In days, the Vex transform Mercury into a planet-sized simulation engine, undoing the paradise that the Traveler had created there. And the Hive, led by two of Oryx's sons, Crota and Nocris, lay claim to Sol. Crota, the athletic one, had begun seeding an army deep within the moon, and Nocris, the intellectual, goes above his dad, buddies up with the worm god Zol, and directly attacks Rasputin on Mars. Rasputin defeats Nocris and Zol by entombing them in ice, but the battle for the system was far from over. Rasputin fights back against the darkness, but even bringing his full arsenal to bear, he is no match for the sheer might that he faces. Those who are able flee to the colony ships to escape the coming destruction, and as his warsat network crumbles, Rasputin realizes that defeat, even extinction, is inevitable. Then something happens that had not happened since the beginning of the Traveler's journey. The Traveler chooses to stay. The reason for this choice is still debated, but the Traveler for the first time does not run away. And with the last of its remaining energy, the Traveler uses its light to push back the darkness. And so the collapse of humanity's golden age is finally over. But the system lies in ruin, and the darkness would be sure to return to finish what it started. But with its dying breath, the traveler creates the ghosts, tiny fragments, pieces of its whole, to seek out and resurrect those capable of wielding its light. The Dark Age. Humanity is thrown into a dark age where the only law is survival. The first ones chosen to be resurrected by their ghosts don't know what to make of their own newfound immortality. Many of these risen become violent warlords who rule wilderness fiefdoms with terror and awe. And then, just to kick them while they're down, the Fallen arrive. Desperate for survival and with some serious second child syndrome, the Fallen pirates begin pillaging and raiding among humanity's survivors. And then there's the Cabal, a vast militaristic empire with enormous world-ending machines. Cabal warriors forcefully expand their empire and absorb or destroy the races they conquer. An entire fleet arrives in the solar system, claiming Mars for themselves, and then they pretty much leave humanity alone. I mean, don't look a gift space turtle in the mouth, but why were they here? Were they running from the darkness? Were they following the darkness? Were they after the Traveler or Rasputin, or just following ancient marching orders that just happened to bring them to our system at the exact same time everyone else and their grandma was here? We may never know. Around 400 years ago, the Iron Lords. In the midst of the warlords and Fallen creating chaos back on Earth, some of the risen choose to rise above the oppression, instead using their immortality for peace and justice, and the Iron Lords are founded. Under the guidance and protection of the Iron Lords, people slowly begin to emerge from hiding, and the scattered remnants of humanity search for the Traveler to build a new life in its shadow. Literally. And then Rasputin is woken up a little grumpy and kills all the Iron Lords. It happens, but hey, he is sorry. Eventually, if amoral and pragmatic ballet-loving AIs can be sorry. A few centuries after the start of the Dark Age, the Awoken. When the Traveler used the last of its light to push back the darkness at the end of the collapse, a singularity formed at the edge between light and dark, and one of the fleeing Exodus ships was pushed into its crushing depths. Inside the singularity, a pocket universe had formed, and the destroyed colonists would slowly redefine themselves and reawaken as the immortal beings within their universe. These Awoken, discovering that thousands of years of their history had gone by while only centuries had progressed outside, decide to return to the world they had left. Seeing the fragile state of humanity, some Awoken chose to share their advanced technologies with Earth to help humanity's survivors, while others decide to hide themselves, making a new home in the reef, the ruins of ships that had fled Earth in the collapse, naming a queen by the name of Mara Sov. Mara sends her brother Uldren out to find what the new universe has to offer, and he returns with a baby Ahamkara named Riven. Because of course, when you go out to see what the entire universe has to offer, you bring back a puppy. With the Wish Dragon's aid, Mara constructs a hidden city in the reef's entangled shores of the asteroid belt to be a safe haven for the Awoken. The Dreaming City and the Ahamkara living there would become the Reef Awoken's most closely guarded secret. Several decades after the Awoken emerge, the City Age. On Earth, rumor of the settlement growing underneath the Traveler spreads. Soon it was no longer a scattering of tents and shelters, but a city in its own right, the last safe city. In its earliest days, the city is divided by the faction wars, ideology that turns into extremism. In the middle of this chaos, the Fallen begin to attack. Driving back a common enemy helps to unite the Risen, who had been acting as the faction's muscles. They decide they will no longer be instruments of oppression, and they put an end to the faction wars, and from this point on would be known as Guardians. Afterwards, a man called the Speaker, claiming to speak for the Traveler, establishes the city consensus as its governing authority. The Guardians begin to form into separate classes: the quick and stealthy hunters, the powerful and strong titans, and the mystic intelligent warlocks. And construction begins on the city walls to protect its people from the dangers of the pirating Fallen and the wilderness. But before the construction of the walls can be completed, the Fallen launch a major coordinated attack against the city. This would come to be known as the Battle of Six Fronts, where 4 orders of titans are remembered for holding the Fallen back from breaching the 6 gaps in the city walls. Ultimately, the Fallen are repelled and many Guardian legends are born. As the walls are completed, the Speaker calls for the formation of the Vanguard. Acting as the Guardian's central command and the city's first line of defense, the first Vanguard, the the hunter Tallulah Fairwind, the Titan, Saint 14, and the warlock Osiris are tasked with the defense of the city. Setting up command in a tower on the city's walls, they send guardians out into the system to scout for threats against the city and fight against the enemies of humanity wherever they may be found. Sometime in the last 100 years, the Cabal Emperor, the Emperor of the Cabal, Callus, had reigned for centuries, loved by all until he was betrayed by his most trusted advisor, Dominus Gaul. E2 Gaul. Callus is exiled, doomed to travel across the void of space in a huge world-eating prison ship. With Callus disposed, Gaul and his Red Legion return the Cabal from Callus's hedonism to a single-minded focus on military might. But that isn't the end of Callus. Eventually, his ship comes to the edge of the deep, and Callus has a nice chat, done some soul-searching, and understands the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. So in a way, he kind of went to college. So he converts his world-eating prison ship into a world-eating luxury party ship. So it's exactly like college, and then goes around recruiting the most fearsome warriors across the galaxy to take back his empire from Gaul. The City Age, Part 2. The city and the Guardians start to make a few too many Ahamkara wishes. Not everyone reads their full wish service agreement. I mean, who has time to go through all that text anyways, right? And Venus starts to glitch out a bit with all the conflicting realities. The Ahamkara's power becomes too high a price to pay, so the Vanguard call for the extinction of the Ahamkara. This was probably all part of the Ahamkara's plan. They have that whole more powerful when dead thing going on, but we try not to think about that too much. Not long after the great Ahamkara hunt, a guardian named CABAL and his Led Zeppelin-loving fire team descend into a Vex construct known as the Vault of Glass on Venus. But the Vex's power in the vault is absolute, and only one, Pahanin, returns. Pahanin lives for fear of being alone for the rest of his life until his light is taken by a man named Dredgen Yor. Once a hero of the city named Rezel Azir, Dredgen Yor has confronted the legends of the Hive deep in the tunnels of the moon, and the darkness he encountered there would become all-consuming. He constructed a powerful weapon named Thorn, capable of draining a guardian's light. Dredgen Yor would go on to kill many more, becoming a feared and hated name among Guardians. The Vanguard, warned of the Hive threat, ordered an all-out assault against the Hive's base of operations on the moon. But the Guardians are unprepared to face Crota, the swole son of Oryx. Crota's son strikes down and drains the light from countless Guardians. The assault becomes known as the Great Disaster, and the Vanguard abandon the moon. And the hated Dredgen Yor continues on his path of darkness. Eventually, a hunter named Shin Malfur, known as the Man with the Golden Gun, finally defeats Yor in a fateful duel. But in their duel, Shin learns an unexpected truth. Dredgen Yor always intended his darkness to be the catalyst that drove Shin to find the true power of light. So Shin, taking a new identity, goes on a quest retracing Dredgen Yor's steps in order to better understand the monster that made him. Under the name of Zaire Orsa, Shin would go on to co-found a group of Yor's disciples called the Shadows of Yor. Here, Shin Malfur could draw out guardians that would tempt the darkness and put down those who strayed too far. Not long after this, the city and a new vanguard, the Titan Savala, the warlock Ikora Ray, and the hunter Andal Brask, face their greatest crisis yet. Unknown to them, the Fallen have regrouped and plan to attack the city with the full strength of the united Fallen houses. But the Awoken Queen, Marasav, knew that if the largest of the Fallen houses, the House of Wolves, were to reach Earth, it would mean the end of the city. Without a way to warn the Earth, the Awoken fleet intercepts the House of Wolves in the asteroid belt, destroying their base on Ceres, along with the entire dwarf planet. Sorry, Ceres, and a bunch of bad guys along with it. Thus begins the Reef Wars. Years of fighting between the Awoken of the Reef and the fallen House of Wolves. At the end of the Reef Wars, the Wolves are defeated and Queen Marasavs becomes their Kel. Back outside the city, without the support of the House of Wolves, the fallen houses of Devils, Kings, and Winter are defeated and finally driven back at a battle known as Twilight Gap. After this, the Fallen would never be able to unite under a single banner again. After Twilight Gap, a former warlord, a titan named Lord Shax, sees a need for future Guardians to receive tactical training in live fire arenas. So he founds the Crucible, where Guardians could fight one another to hone their skills and better prepare against the city's enemies. Quick note here, the Crucible existed prior to this, but as a completely different thing. More of a facilitation to an old Western-style duel. Shax's Crucible, as we know today, started here. Another Titan, Saint 14, goes on a famed crusade against the Fallen in the name of the hero guardian that he prophesied would one day come. Little did he know, as he left the city in search of the exiled warlock Osiris, never to return, that the hero guardian is about to awaken. That's you! Destiny 1, The Guardian awakens. After centuries of searching, Ghost finally finds his chosen lightbearer. The Guardian is resurrected in Old Russia, deep in the heart of Fallen territory. And so begins the Guardian's many deeds, crippling the Fallen's grip on Old Russia, reactivating Rasputin's Warsat array, and freeing a shard of the Traveler from the Hive. All this activity is noticed by a parallel timeline jumping stranger, who warns the Guardian about the threat of the Vex and the Heart of Darkness growing in a place called the Black Garden. After doing some errand running for Marasov's jerk brother Uldren, the Awoken Queen reluctantly reveals the location of the Black Garden, smack dab in the middle of Cabal territory on Mars. So, whether they wanted it or not, the Guardian shoots their way through the Cabal, enters the Black Garden, and learns that there's no problem you can't fix, or black amorphous goo you can't destroy, with enough firepower. With the Heart of Darkness gone, light begins to return to the Traveler. The Ecto-Stranger shows up one last time to give the Guardian a crappy gun, and then her plot thread is dropped faster than Anthem's player base. Soon after this, Aaron Moore, the last survivor of a failed expedition to take vengeance on the Hive god Crota and desperately in need of a new brand of mascara, escapes the Hive's tunnels on the moon and returns to the tower. Eris warns the Guardian that Crota is about to wake up from a long nap, so the Guardians march into his bedroom in the Ascendant Plane and take him out before he can even get his pants on. Metaphorically speaking, of course, because none of us want to see that. But it turns out Crota had been wire transferring his paycheck to his deadbeat dad Oryx, and Oryx was none too happy about losing a big chunk of his income. The Nine could sense that Oryx was coming, and they knew that if the system was to survive, the city and the aloof Awoken were going to have to work together. So the Nine released the fanatic fallen Kel Skolas from prison, who was given to them by Marasov in the first place. She should really have a no takebacks policy, but here we are. Knowing that Skola's fanaticism would be the catalyst needed to unite the Guardians and the Reef Awoken in preparation for the coming threat. With Skolas defeated, Eris Moore, who also sensed Oryx coming, together with the warlock Osiris, is granted an audience with Queen Mara to warn her of Oryx's coming. Together they devise a plan to use Oryx's strength against him. With the aid of Riven, the last Ahamkara, Mara creates her own dominion in the Ascendant Plane, a place she names Eleusinia, and sets her plan into action. Destiny 1, The Taken War. Oryx, the Taken King, arrives with his fleet of Hive tomb ships. In the rings of Saturn, the Awoken fleet meets him head-on, and the Battle of Saturn is fought. Mara fires her Harbingers, weird living balls of light, into Oryx's flagship, disabling it. But Oryx has a devastating weapon up his sleeve, and with a plunge of his sword, he pushes his throne world and the Ascendant Plane out into our reality. The shockwave consumes everything in its path. Marasov and the Awoken fleet are destroyed. Oryx then begins raising an army of Taken warriors, beings taken from other races including Riven, the last Ahamkara. Stripped of their will and given a new purpose, these Taken begin invading worlds across the system. But Mara had prepared for this. As she died, she stepped into the Ascendant Plane of Oryx's throne, where she could wait while Eris helped the Guardian learn how to weaken and finally defeat Oryx. After Oryx's death, Mara finds her way across the Ascendant Plane back to Eleusinia, where she is able to return to the Dreaming City, but finding that Riven had been taken, Mara withdraws to her secret court to regain her strength and plan her next move. With Oryx defeated, his Taken army remains leaderless, and the Guardian continues to fight against them. But the Cabal had gotten the worst of the Taken War. Between wars of attrition on multiple fronts with the innumerable Vex, the Taken, and the immortal Guardians, the Cabal have no other choice but to launch a last-ditch campaign into Oryx's flagship, to try to learn from the Hive how to kill a Guardian permanently, because they'd kind of been a pain up to this point. But this campaign is fatal, and the last of the Cabal sent out a distress signal to their leader, Dominus Gall, who begins mobilizing his Red Legion to annihilate the Guardians and take the Traveler's Light for himself. Destiny 2, The Red War. Dominus Gall gathers his fleet at the edge of the Sol system as he prepares to attack the city. It is here that the exiled Cabal Emperor Callus with his elite squad of Shadow Assassins moves on Gall. In a suicide mission, the Shadows board Gall's flagship and nearly succeed, but Gall survives their attack and continues his advance on Earth. The Nine sense Gall's coming attack. His plan to harness the Traveler's Light for himself is something the Nine deeply wanted to learn how to do. With the para-casual force of the Traveler's Light, the Nine see a chance to free themselves from their fragile dependence on life. So, in order to learn from Gall, one of the Nine, probably Mercury, a jerk, blinds everyone to Gall's approach. The dead orbit fleets in the deep system, the Awoken in the reef, the early warning satellites in orbit around Earth, all are caught without warning when Gall's Red Legion fleet destroys the tower, cages the Traveler, and occupies the last city. I also like thinking even Gall was surprised by this, like, guys, how have we not been caught yet? You know what, don't even question it, just keep going. Just keep going. With the Traveler caged, Guardians across the system suddenly find themselves without their light, and countless lives, including the Speaker himself, are lost, unable to rise again. But the Guardian, weak as they are, is guided by visions to a shard of the Traveler in the European Dead Zone, and with it is able to reconnect to the light. The Guardian helps reunite the scattered forces of the city across the system and together launches a counteroffensive against Gall. But Gall succeeds at imbuing himself with Traveler's Light, but just when all seems lost, the Traveler itself awakens. It casts off its cage and destroys Dominus Gall, who at the end just had some seriously overblown daddy issues. And the light, sending a shockwave across the system, returns to the remaining Guardians. The Guardians' defeat of Gall impresses Emperor Callus, so he invites the Guardians to a test of might on his party ship, the Leviathan. No, it doesn't involve shots, like I hoped. Well, I mean it does, but not the shots you're maybe thinking of when you hear party ship. Now parked at the Vex-converted world of Nessus and kind of eating it, the Guardians are okay with that, it seems, to see if they are worthy of becoming one of his Shadow Assassins. Callus bestows gifts upon any Guardian worthy enough to pass his tests, but the light's return to the system has an unintended consequence. As it washes over Mars, the frozen tomb of Oryx's nerd son Nokris and the great worm Zol begin to thaw. Freed from Rasputin's prison, Nokris and Zol resume their assault on the Warmind. Onabray, now resurrected as a Guardian, calls the Guardian to Mars to help stop the worm and his priest. With Anna's aid, Rasputin intervenes, finally doing something with his life for once, giving the Guardian a Golden Age weapon powerful enough to finally defeat Nokris and Zol. Destiny 2, Forsaken. Oryx and his sons were defeated, but the battle against the Hive was far from over. Zavathun, Witch Queen, Deceiver, and sister of Oryx, secretly infiltrates the Dreaming City and retakes control of the taken Ahamkara Riven. Queen Mara's brother, Prince Uldren, still grieving his sister's death, and unaware of her return, as was the rest of the fandom, comes across a dying fallen Archon named Fikrul. Uldren takes pity on the Archon and unknowingly makes a wish, a bargain with Riven to save Fikrul's life. The wish corrupts both the Archon's ether, and soon Riven begins to speak to Uldren, pretending to be a vision of his sister, leading him down a very dark path. After causing chaos in the reef, Uldren and Fikrul are eventually captured and imprisoned. Their warden, a follow named Varix, who was once an ally of the Guardian, does some mad scientist experiments on Fikrul's corrupted ether, eventually turning into a dark concoction that is capable of reanimating dead fallen. With a new undead army known as the Scorn, Uldren and Fikrul convince their warden to set them free. The Hunter Vanguard, Cade 6, and the Guardian are called to the prison to contain the ensuing riots, but Cade 6 is killed by Uldren in a moment that shocked the Destiny fanbase, who, with the Scorn at his side, made their escape and began plotting a way to open the sealed doors of the Dreaming City. Driven by the death of Cade 6, the Guardian tracks Uldren into the Dreaming City and kills him in a not-so-cathartic act of revenge that the game tries to make you feel conflicted about. There, the Guardian is able to make contact with Morosov, who orders the Ahamkara Riven to be killed. But this had been Riven's plan
plan all along. The united wish of 6 god-slaying guardians who want nothing more than to kill her gives Riven enough power to breach the Dreaming City's defenses for Savathun's forces. Congrats, Guardians, you played yourself, all for the loot. And so begins the Curse of the Dreaming City, a Vex simulation made real by Ahamkara's magic. The city and its inhabitants are doomed to repeat these same actions over and over and over again. The Guardians work tirelessly week after week to try to find a way to break the curse off of the Dreaming City. The mystery of the curse's true purpose is still unknown, but one thing is certain: the plans of the cunning Savathun are never plain. In the midst of this, the 9 send their emissary, and with the aid of a rogue lightbearer named the Drifter, extend a personal invitation to the Guardian to be tested to see if the Guardian is worthy enough to face the trials to come. The emissary, the Drifter, and Marasav have all warned that something else is coming. The darkness, maybe even a second collapse, is on the horizon. Only 3 beings have ever transcended their design, says the emissary. Will the Guardian be the 4th? Will the curse of the Dreaming City be broken? Find out next time on Destiny Ball Z. As of Destiny 2's Season of the Drifter, the Destiny franchise is just about halfway through its promised life cycle, and there's still a lot more Destiny lore to come. Once again, I am Alpha Lance with the Leaderboard, and if you liked this video, subscribe. And thanks for watching. And once again, thank you to Scoobydeezy and the Ghost Stories podcast community for this comprehensive timeline.